Greetings everybody around the world. It's time once again for Ancient Aliens Radio. This is the dedicated radio show for the cast of Ancient Aliens. Here we interview authors and researchers as an ongoing investigation into the ancient alien theory. Don't forget to like us on Facebook or subscribe to the YouTube channel Ancient Aliens Radio. Today I'm going to be joined again by my returning guest, Mr. Robert Bauval. Okay, so Robert Bauval does not need much of an entrance. If you haven't checked out his archive show, I recommend you to do so. But Robert's going to be coming back today. He's going to talk to us a little bit about some conferences he's been doing and an Egypt update. So without further ado, let's bring on our guest for today. Hi, Robert. Welcome back.
Hello, James. Nice being back. And listen, what do you mean I don't need a big entrance? I've got a big head, as people say. I need a huge entrance.
Well,
no. I'm in one of those horsing mood this morning.
That's okay. That's good.
Please ask me about Egypt and anything you want. I'll be delighted to answer.
Sure. You know, Robert, it's actually, there's something like, I've done 50 shows since we last spoke, would you believe? Which is only, that's only since July, but I think a lot's happened for you since July as well.
I've written a book as well since then.
You've written a book and traveled the world for conferences, and I wanted to talk to you about, I've had Scotty Roberts on for, I wanted to talk to you about the Paradigm Symposium.
Yep.
Tell me how the conference went for that, Robert, first of all, and what was the outcome?
Well, I'm glad you're asking me this, because I had in mind to use this show to make a point clear. It's very important these days. Let me explain. The Paradigm Symposium, organized by Scotty in Minnesota. Sorry, what am I saying? Yes, we were in St. Paul's, Minnesota.
Sure.
Well, as you know, it's the paradigm that they are speaking about is mostly to do with the Ancient Alien program, you know, the History Channel program.
Sure, I know.
And I heard a very annoying statement made, in fact, in London during the Origins conference. I won't name names, but somebody said, you know, we don't like people who associate with the Ancient Alien program. And
wow.
I need to make a point clear here. Can I do that?
Oh, please, Robert. This is an open freedom for information.
Yeah, let's do it, yeah. Well, number one is people know very well, those who have followed my work, that I do not speak about ancient aliens in my books or Atlantis or whatever. But having said this, I don't think there's a problem speaking about these topics. You know, it's kind of weird, but in the technological age that we're in, I mean, I deal a lot with cosmologists. I've had the pleasure to meet some of the top cosmologists in the world. Chandra Wickramasinghe, who I met in the 90s, and we even gave conferences together. Chandra Wickramasinghe is the famous cosmologist at Cardiff University. He in fact was with Fred Hoyle when the Big Bang theories came out, and he's the one with Hoyle who proposed the panspermia theory, which was rejected at the time, and it's being accepted now. You know, the idea that comets injected life on Earth. You know, I've had wonderful discussions with Archie Roy, the astrophysicist who passed away unfortunately last year. Mary Brooke, I met two astronomer royals of Scotland. One of them came on tour with me in Egypt. Having said this, you know, it's not that I'm blowing my trumpet, but you know, the public or the skeptical public should realize that today astrophysicists and cosmologists, and in fact most top scientists, are totally okay with speaking about the possibility of alien life outside our planetary system. You know, because recent findings have proved beyond any shadow of a doubt that there are exoplanets outside our solar system. There are about 3,000 plus planets that have been found, some of them very Earth-like. We're even talking about the possibility of water and life on Mars, which is our next door planet. They estimate something like 1 billion stars within our galactic system. there are billions of galaxies out there, the odds are extremely high, to say the least, that there is life out there, and probably intelligent life, and who knows, maybe life that's connected with our own planetary systems. So it's okay, I mean,
it's okay.
Yeah, it's okay to talk about this. I really want to make the point, because in fact I'm coming to London in a few days' time to give an interview again to Ancient Alien series. And they know my position extremely well. I'm open. I'll quote I think it was Groucho Marx who said, it was David Hawkins who said, I'm ready to have an open mind, but I'm not ready to have my brains drop out. So I'm okay to consider the possibility of ancient aliens out there, and maybe even, who knows, in people visitations on our planet in the distant past. I mean, it's not impossible. However, I'm not ready to drop my brains out. When people come up with theories that Einstein was an ancient alien, or the Queen of England.
I know.
That's the difference. And sorry to sort of use your show for this, but I think somebody has to say it.
Well, Robert, this is the thing. What I see, what I like, first of all, about Ancient Aliens, the show, is there's a rich source of footage from ancient sites all around the world. I don't have to believe in an ancient alien to look at the rich sources of footage that's in that telephone program. And I know there's people, I'm one of these conscious evolved beings that can make the distinction, and you can tell who was on the show, who actually believes in ancient aliens and who doesn't believe in ancient aliens, because there's people from the alternative history community like yourself, Robert, and Graham Hancock, and they don't necessarily have a position on an ancient alien. But they're still on the show.
I'm going to interrupt you there, James. It's okay to believe in ancient aliens. Believing is one thing. Arguing that there is proof is another. And this is where I differ a lot from the people who go on ancient aliens, some of them. There is no proof yet. And there may never be proof. But believing in it and being open to it is okay. It really is. It's okay. We live in a very mysterious universe that we have no idea what it's all about. We have no idea what it's all about on this planet. So it's okay. We know enough now in cosmology to... in fact, it's quite the opposite. People who say there isn't life out there in the scientific world are looking dumb these days, because the odds are very much stacked in favor of finding very soon, by the way, an exoplanet that might have life and might have evolved life. And indeed, who knows, maybe even more evolved than we are. So it's true. It's the reality of today, and I really balk at people who, when you say ancient aliens or Atlantis, they immediately brand you as some sort of lunatic, Some
sort of a taboo with it, isn't it?
Well, I met all the protagonists in this field. I mean, not just the cosmologists. I'm a very good friend of Eric von Däniken. I'm a very good friend of many others who believe and who've argued the case. They know my position, and they're not mad. I mean, they just approach this in a different way than I do. I'm very evidence-driven, and I look at evidence that is, in my view, evidence that is worthy of investigation. I mean, there are mysteries in this world. I mean, there are mysteries with the pyramids, but you don't jump to conclusions that everything you can't explain is from ancient aliens. So that's where I differ. Having said this, let's get back to the Paradigm Symposium.
Sure.
The Paradigm Symposium was a lot of fun. And indeed, what I've just said about ancient aliens, there was there, and again, I'm not naming names, but there was there an Egyptologist. A very nice, a very pleasant Egyptologist, but felt very uncomfortable being there because of the ancient aliens tag. And I had the same discussion, the same conversation, and the person began to feel, yeah, it's okay. It's okay. This is the 21st century. We have gay marriages. We have opened up to all sorts of things. Ancient aliens isn't a bad word,
Robert, just to cut in, I once told people, now I do look into Atlantis, and in terms of a lost culture, 10,000 BC, and but in general, looking into it, not like a dogmatic obsession, but I told somebody this when I was in university doing a physics degree, Robert, and he never spoke to me again. He never spoke to me again. One of my research Atlantis. I swear to God, you wouldn't believe the outcome. And I found an asteroid with this guy. I had rapport with him. He was like buddies for months, like.
I know. Believe me, your experience is nothing to what I've been through. I mean, I said 3 stars looked like 3 pyramids on the ground, and I produced a stack of very convincing evidence based on proper research and ancient texts. But the minute I said this, Egyptologists ran away. I mean, it was very weird for me. I'm a qualified construction engineer. I deal with nuts and bolts and concrete, But, it was very, very strange. And I remember I was very, very close to, at his later age, to Sir Ivan Edwards. Sir Ivan Edwards is probably, or was, because he passed away in 96, one of the most eminent Egyptologists in the 20th century. And I used to go and have tea with him, and he was very open to my theory. He really was. And in fact, he supported me as much as he could. The very first time he ever came on television was in 94 when I did my program with the BBC, and he was there. And believe me, he was shocked. Because after that, all Egyptologists said, "How can you support this?" And it was very strange. But when I suggested that the astronomy, the analysis of the astronomy, and supported by geological investigation, that the ancient Egyptian civilization might be much older, much older, he wrote me a letter saying, I cannot support this anymore, and I'm sorry, and maybe it's better we don't meet. And I thought, my God, I don't have leprosy or anything. It's just evidence that suggests. Sorry, James, are you still there?
Yeah. I'm going, wow, this is.
Yes, I mean, I'm 65 now. I have no problem speaking out, and I speak my mind, and I say what has to be said. I adored Professor Edwards. He was a lovely man. He was very open to ideas, and he in fact went out, if you like, in supporting what was considered a very controversial theory at the time. But to the public out there, it wasn't controversial. It was really fun. It was a great theory. The pyramid texts say the king wants to go to Orion's belt. There's a shaft pointing to Orion's belt. The pyramids on the ground looks like Orion's belt. Yeah. But to the Egyptologists, it was like Galileo, who confronted totally baffled with proof and evidence and telescopes that the Earth was round, and that it was the Earth that went around the sun. And he confronted a group of cardinals who said, "Look, we'll burn you if you keep saying that."
Big question then for you, Robert. Set the ancient alien question aside. What about the ancient engineer question of not how the pyramids were done? Because I think what do you think of these guys as an engineer? I'm an engineer, Robert. We're among friends here. What do you think of these guys as engineers, their consciousness, how these guys did all this? Because the pyramids and the temples, Robert, they're phenomenal feats of engineering. And I think the Sphinx Valley Temple, I think this is one of the biggest anomalies, because there's a 200-ton lintel stone maneuvered into a tight corner, and we can get the 200-ton lintels up and down off the ground, but we can't get the cranes into the corner to maneuver them in. So, Robert, what's going on here? What do you think of these guys as ancient engineers?
Well, let me take your question slowly here. Well, there's a lot of rubbish that has been said, as you probably know, as to how these pyramids were built. There are as many theories as there are lunatics in the world. I'm not belittling anybody that has a theory, but let's be sensible here. The pyramids are there. Now, very often let's take the Great Pyramid, because the Great Pyramid is the big baby that everybody focuses on, although there are 25 royal pyramids in the Memphite necropolis in the Cairo area. But yes, the Great Pyramid is the Great Pyramid, and it's very special, and it's very big, and we all know that. But it's not as perfect as people think. You know, I keep hearing on TV, you know, it's the most perfect, it's impossible to build, and, you know, I'd love it to be that, but it's not. You know, I've lived there, James. I've spent 3 years living. Well, as you know, I was born in Egypt, but I spent from 2005 to 2008 literally at the doorstep of the Great Pyramid.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I know the Great Pyramid. I mean, and yes, it is amazingly perfect in the sense when you put it in the context when it was built, at the time when it was built. But it, you know, the inside core is very rough. I mean, we can see that when you go in the Queen's Chamber, for example. There is a tunnel that has been blown out, by the way, unfortunately, by 19th century explorers.
Sure.
And we can see the core. You know, nonetheless, they managed to do something extraordinary, not just in its size. I think one of the most extraordinary things about the Great Pyramid, by the way, in terms of construction, is maintaining the accuracy of the slope. A lot of people don't realize this, but
that's a difficult one.
Absolutely, because if you have a monument of this size, considering the difficulty, as you pointed out, in maneuvering stones and lifting stones, then to bring 4 corners to meet 146 meters higher up in the air at precisely that point, to a construction engineer, he knows the difficulty. I mean, I used to do setting out like all engineers in my early days, and I know how difficult it is to do this. So yeah, they were extraordinary builders. They really were, and then you have things that are unexplained. There are unexplained features in the Great Pyramid. There are unexplained features outside the Great Pyramid. You just pointed to one of them. You know, the valley temples and the mortuary temples. There are blocks there that average 50 tons. There's 1 or 2 that are nearly 150 tons, and you rightly said there is one of them that is estimated to be 200 tons. That's a big, that's that's a mother of a block. I mean,
Robert, I would have took the day off if I was asked to maneuver that in ancient times.
Well, let me give you. You're an engineer, so I don't have to explain to you. But let me give your listeners what it means. You know, a 200-ton block is taking 400 family cars and squishing them together, okay? That's the weight of this block. Now, its size, well, I'm going to do a very rough calculation, but if you can imagine sort of a room about 15 meters, 10 meters long and 5 meters high, okay? That's the kind of volume we're talking about. To move a block like this today, well, first of all, I mean, you just don't call a contractor and say, I got a 200-ton block to move, you know? Yeah. He would laugh. He would say, well, you know, give me a month to prepare this, because if he can find the right cranes and get them on the site. While I'm talking to you, I remember a story that actually happened to me when I was working in Africa, in Guinea, in West Africa. Yeah. I was working for a contracting company. It was a very primitive place. You know, it was very, very technologically backwards. Anyway, they were sending us cars, believe it or not, and a lot of material with a chartered plane from England. So they had this 747 charter, and it landed in this very, very primitive airspace in the capital of Conakry. I'm talking like 1977, so it was a long time ago. And boy, we got the plane arrived, and somebody said, "How do we get those cars off the plane?" You know, and whoops, the airport did not have the proper equipment. We actually had to go to the port. And there they finally supplied us with a lifting platform, which took the whole night. So and that was just half a ton, a small car.
Half a ton.
Yeah. So you can't believe it. I mean, it was an incredible exercise to do this. So can you imagine a 200-ton block? First of all, a 200-ton block to cut it, and move it around, let alone lift it. And then, you have to lift this thing and put it in position. I cannot explain, to be honest with you, I cannot explain. It doesn't mean there is ancient aliens, okay? It means that we simply can't explain it, and there is an explanation somewhere. There is another question to ask, is why use a 200-ton block?
Why do it in the first place? Yeah, Robert, that's the biggest thing of all, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, why?
Robert, because they could.
Well, let me rephrase the question. Why go through this horrendous and difficult exercise to build a small temple, because they're not very big, considering the other temples we have in Egypt, with 50-ton blocks and 150-ton blocks? I mean, you don't need to do this, and we know they knew that they didn't need to do this, because there are other temples in the vicinity that are built with moderate-sized blocks. I mean, a half-ton, 2 tons, even that is big, but it's at least you can move them around. And we know they knew how to build with what we would call today manual blocks that one person can lift. That's why we have blocks that don't exceed 15 kilos when we do building works abroad, because one man can move them. So they did this at Saqqara, the very first project, which, by the way, it's about what I talk in Imhotep, the book that we're supposed to talk about.
Yes, we're going to get on to that in a minute, Rob.
Yeah. The Saqqara project, the wall, the boundary wall is built with blocks that are about something between 10 and 20 kilos. Very possible to lift. A good strong man can lift those blocks and place them. So they knew how to do this. So why suddenly go bananas and say we're going to build with 50-ton and 200-ton blocks?
Wow, no.
Do you understand?
Yeah.
So,
it's a big puzzle, isn't it?
Well, let me give you an idea. I mean, it's as absurd as saying, look, it's raining outside, but you don't take your umbrella, you take your whole house and to cover yourself. It's
exactly
totally
right.
insane.
I like that.
Well, what seems weird is that we really need to explain this. And Egyptologists have been ignoring this, and wash their hands and simply say, well, it can be done. Well, it can be done, but it can be done with tremendous difficulty even today. But it's not the question whether it can be done.
I find a big quantity of engineers getting involved now, Robert. I do see a paradigm changing. I know you're at the Paradigm Conference, but I'm just talking in terms of a paradigm. I see architects and engineers starting to flock to the pyramids and other ancient sites around the world to figure them out, Robert, because they know there's a puzzle there, and they know that alternative or mainstream history, there's a war going on, and then they know that the Egyptologists and the academics have basically just, as you say, ignored this problem, Robert, and it is a problem. It is a problem.
There was a program on TV the other month, done, I think, I'm not too sure, I think it was Channel 4, but I may be mistaken. But anyway, it was all about how they were going to explain. Yes, in fact, it was a French program. Sorry, I'm mistaken. How they were going to explain the carving and moving of the so-called unfinished obelisk that is at the quarry in Aswan. I don't know if you know about this one, but there's a giant obelisk.
Yeah.
Absolute monster one. It's estimated to be 1,200 tons. Now, I would have balked and rolled on the floor if somebody today said, we want to cut a granite block that size and take it from Aswan to Cairo.
Sure. I would say go ahead on a walk in the other direction. Go ahead, guys. Knock yourself out.
I was called the psychological department, and saying this guy is mad. But anyway, there you are. They clearly try to do it. Unfortunately, the block cracked before they could fully remove it. But there was this program on TV, and they had all these Egyptologists, and they had this graphic thing, and they showed how it could be done using graphics. They had all these virtual Egyptians, with stone, and they were cutting and carving, and then they rolled the thing on sand, and they placed it on a platform, and they took it to the Nile, and they sailed it, It was all done with graphics. And with graphics, you can do anything these days.
Sure.
But hey, I've worked in the desert, James. I worked with construction companies working in Saudi Arabia, in the middle of nowhere, with equipment. And believe me, we had problems with we would advise clients, as a matter of fact, not to use certain materials because of the difficulty, not only in construction, but in maintenance.
Yeah.
We had these very rich Saudi clients who said, we want to put marble on this building, in the middle of the desert. We said, well, first of all, it's going to cost you a lot to get the thing. You have to bring it from Italy, the marble you want. But then you'll have to maintain this. And every time you need to maintain it, you have to bring some more. And this is the illogic issues that one has to consider. And when you're not an engineer, when you're not somebody thinking in those terms, when you are an Egyptologist, and I don't mean that in a bad way, but if you're somebody who's been studying Egyptology in the humanities and you have no idea about engineering or astronomy, by the way, then you are not going to understand these things. And this is my grievance with this academic people.
Exactly. And Robbie, this is why I listen to you, and this is why I listen to even Graham Hancock, who has no qualifications in engineering or astronomy. But Graham is a journalist, and I think Graham has a very unique skill set to bring, because he's relaying a story, because a journalist looks into a wider spectrum of evidence. He doesn't care what information he's looking into. He just looks into the story, and if he has to go into astronomy, engineering, or maybe it's some humanity issue, whatever that Graham started off with. But this is why I listen to Graham Hancock. This is why I listen to Robert Bauval, and everybody else. Even there's John Anthony West, and there's various people out there, Robert, that has a unique skill set. Okay, I'm not going to ask you another question on the engineering. I want to get into the book, Robert. That's why we're here today.
I want to say something about Graham Hancock. As you know, Graham Hancock and I are colleagues, and we've written several books together. And yes, first of all, Graham has a tremendous skill, a natural skill. He's a great writer and a great speaker, and a very convincing one. But you're right. He's not an engineer, he's not an astronomer, he's not a scientist, but he follows the story. He's an intelligent man, and he's not afraid to follow a story if the evidence suggests that it should be followed. I'll quote this, and then we'll move in a different thing.
Yeah.
Robert Schoch, who's a great buddy of mine. You know Robert Schoch?
Yeah, he's been on the show. He's a great guy.
Yeah, Robert Schoch presented the arguments for an older sphinx at the American Geological Convention Association in 1992, I think it was. And there was a bunch of Egyptologists there, and one of them angrily stood up and said, Mr. Schoch, nobody agrees with you. No Egyptologist agrees with you. And he coldly looked, he was a young man in those days, and he coldly looked at him and said, I do not follow the Egyptologist. I follow the science.
That was a nice retort. That does cut them down to ground level, basically.
And John West, who was there, mumbled, truth is not democratic. We don't vote for truth. We don't get a bunch of Egyptologists saying we vote that you're wrong.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
And that is where we have a problem with people with the humanities. They argue from a very different perspective. I've had Egyptologists telling me, I don't agree with this alignment. I said, I don't care if you're the Archangel Gabriel. The alignment is an alignment. 2 and 2 is 4.
That's it.
That's it. Anyway, go on. What's your next question, James?
And of course, you've just met Graham and at the Origins conference that we were just speaking about. So
Yes.
Good to see you guys get together again, Robert, and knock heads again. But you have a new book out, Robert, Imhotep, the African Architect of the Cosmos. What an awesome book again, Robert. I'm going to get Thomas Brophy on as soon as Gary Evans gets back from his holiday, because he's still in America, by the way, Robert.
He's back today.
Is he back today? Great. Okay, I'm going to chase him down to get Thomas Brophy on the show, because I want to talk to Thomas anyway. I love astronomy, Robert, as you know. It's all about astronomy for me. I think we have a beautiful tool to look into the past for archaeoastronomy. But we're looking at this guy, Imhotep, the African architect of the cosmos. He was like a super scientist, Robert. Let's give us a little bit of background to the book, Robert, who this Imhotep guy was, and obviously where we can get the book, Robert.
Well, first, the title of the the title of the book is Imhotep, the African Architect of the Cosmos. Architect of the Cosmos is coined by an Egyptologist, Jean-Philippe Loer, who passed away. I used to know, I met him a couple of times, who came up with this name because he designs what is best termed, using our language today, a metaphysical machine, if you like. I mean, that's what the pyramids are. I mean, you have to think of them in terms of ideologies. They're stone structures, they're architectural structures, but the idea behind them is metaphysical. They're not practical buildings. There's nothing practical about building a pyramid. Like somebody said, and I'm going to shock some of your listeners, there's nothing more useless than the Great Pyramid, if you think in terms of practicality. But it is an amazingly, wonderfully functional monument in terms of metaphysics. And this is
symbolic.
Well, yeah, symbolic. Metaphysics. We are human beings that have a soul, whether we like it or not, whether people want to deny it. And we think in terms of not just practical. If we did, we would jump from the nearest balcony. We think, luckily so, we believe in things that cannot be proved, cannot be weighed, cannot be measured, This is what I mean by metaphysical thinking. We believe in friendship, we believe in love, we believe in, and some people believe in afterlife, eternity. We need this. We need this because otherwise it doesn't make sense. Having said this, the Egyptians were absolutely convinced, without a doubt. The monuments prove this, that they believed in the afterlife. They believed that it was possible to transfer a physical body into a spiritual state, and he would return to his ancestral home in the sky. Now, today, putting it in those terms, we call it superstition and whatever. But to them, it was a reality. They really believed, and they went to a lot of trouble. What you see there, the pyramids, and coming to Imhotep, the famous Saqqara complex, which I will talk about in a minute, is proof that they attempted to build the hardware of a metaphysical science in order to achieve this objective. Does it make sense to you, James?
Oh, totally, Robert, totally. It's something that people don't seem to concentrate on, metaphysics, Robert, when you talk about ancient Egypt.
Well, we have to, and Egyptologists are uncomfortable with this, but there you are. It is what the ancient Egyptians were. They were very highly metaphysical thinkers. And indeed, not just them. I mean, nearly every ancient culture.
Yeah.
So, having said this, I suppose you being an engineer would understand this very quickly. Imhotep, and I'll explain who Imhotep was. Imhotep, we don't know much about him, to be honest. That's why I wrote this book. We read him through his project, like a book.
His career, basically.
But his book is the Saqqara complex. It's a book in stone, if you like.
Mm-hmm.
And if you know how to read it, you can understand a great deal about this man. But anyway, what we know for sure, he was a high priest of Heliopolis. And having said this, we know what high priests of Heliopolis were. They were highly initiated individuals, particularly in astronomy. We know that for sure. We have many ancient Egyptian writings that explain these mysterious characters that were at the head of an initiatory college at Heliopolis, the city of the sun, who were regarded as geniuses because they could. It's something very hard for us to understand, but a highly initiated individual of that kind would spend years and years observing the sky and trying to understand, without the science, without the technology, because they didn't have this. They didn't have the technology we have today. But they had a mind. They had they had the same mind as we do. They have the same brain as we do.
Mm-hmm.
But they used that powerful tool. We all have that powerful tool. But they used it to try and comprehend and make sense without the science. This is an extraordinary thing for me because they were geniuses. Imhotep was a genius. He was a Newton, Einstein, Da Vinci,
Yeah.
But rather than externalize his approach to understanding the world, which is what our scientists do today, he internalized. He used all the potential that he had as a human being to understand the world. And this, to me, is probably one of the big errors we are doing today. We are ignoring these immense capacities that human beings have, each one of us have. We try and understand it from the outside too much. I'm not saying that's not good. I'm saying that there is a search to do within, the famous Gnostic search, if you like, the Hermetic search, the attempt to reach your inner knowledge, because we're made of the same stuff as the universe. Somewhere in there is knowledge. As I'm talking to you, unknowingly to me, uncontrolled to me, is a human body being functioning. Blood is being pumped and cells are being repaired and my brain is working, with a zillion messages passing. This is a wonderful thing we are. And we don't use it. Well, Imhotep did, okay? So that's the point I want to make. So we're dealing with such a man, and a special one. And what happened is somewhere along the line, him being the first to do it, King Zoser, we know the king who commissioned him, said, build me a machine. Build me something that I can go back to my ancestral home in the sky among the stars. That's his commission. And he did. He produced the Saqqara complex. And this is why, with this in mind, however uncomfortable Egyptologists are, with this in mind, then you can read them. You can go there and you measure it and you study it and you look at the way it's aligned, you look at what he put there, you look at all the details, and it opens up like a book. Once,
in a way, like a museum of knowledge incorporated into the one thing.
Yes, it's like studying the Mona Lisa, if you're going to study it from the wrong point of view and you say, no, I'm an accountant, I'm going to measure the wood and the painting, and no, you can only study it from an artist's point of view. You need to look at it, and you can spend hours. You can write books about it, because that's what it is. There is a depth of what you're seeing there. It isn't just a stone monument that Imhotep built, a tomb like Egyptologists say. No, it is the whole knowledge of what they believed in converted into a physical architectural project. This is what it is. And this is what Tom Brophy and I attempted to do. And I went there many times. Tom has visited a couple of times with me. We looked at all the research, we looked at all the plans, the pictures, the satellite imagery, we measured, and suddenly this thing begins to expose itself. It's like understanding the hieroglyphs with Champollion. He was looking at drawings and designs, and then suddenly emerges a language.
Wow.
Are you with me, James?
Yeah, totally.
Well, that's what we did. You need to have engineers, architects who understand symbolic architecture. You need to have astronomers who can read numbers and measurements and see in them. Let me give you an example, and Tom will give you more details about this.
Sure.
The boundary wall. To Egyptologists, it's a wall. It's a big wall. It's a very impressive wall, but it's a wall. No, it is a message in stone. For example, it's a huge rectangle. It's the whole complex encompassed in this rectangular wall. The wall itself is 10 meters high. It measures about half a kilometer on each side, the long sides, and a quarter of a kilometer on the shorter sides. It's gigantic. But somebody had the gumption, because as you look at it, I wish I had pictures to show, but we're on the radio show. But this wall has very strange features. It's got these bastions, dozens of them sticking out, like a fortress. And there are what we call panels. There are cuts into the wall, vertical cuts. They were actually cut on location, very, very straight. It's quite amazing how they did this. 7 meters high cuts, some protruding, some indenting. When you count these, and somebody had the bright idea of saying, well, they went to the whole trouble of doing this, so let's see how many there are. And suddenly the wall begins to speak. There are 1,461 on the west wall, there's 1,458 on the east wall, there's 366 times 2 on the north, and the same on the south wall. It immediately starts speaking astronomy.
Wow.
Let me explain to an astronomer who has studied ancient Egypt astronomy. What the figure 1461 jumps out like a volcano exploding.
And the 366 as well.
Yeah, the 36 immediately says 365 plus 1. Why? Because that's how stars behave when you observe the star series. With this, because we have a quarter of a day. When they observed stars, and especially the star series, which we know they're very focused on, then they observed it for 3 years, 365, and the 4th year they had to wait an extra day. Do you understand?
Sure, yeah.
So, and we know they did this. So it's in the wall, it's there. But what of the 1461? Well, 1461 is the famous Sotic cycle. They didn't adjust the calendar for a quarter of a day, James. So they let it drift. And when you let a calendar drift, it loses a day every 4 years. It regenerates itself. It comes to zero, like putting the tachometer of a car back to zero, or a watch. Comes back to zero every 1,461 years. But that is calculated. You multiply 4 times 365 and a quarter, you get 1461, right?
Sure.
Right. Well, but what about 1458 on the other side? Well, 1458, and there were studies done by Egyptologists themselves. It is the actually observed Sotic cycle. Somebody observed it. It's observed, and it's the one particularly before Imhotep. It varies by a year or 2 or 3 years sometimes every cycle. Well, the one before Imhotep was 1458. These guys had observed it. It's not coincidence. It's there. It's in the design, and it's been screaming out for centuries. And it needs people like Tom. Sorry?
Begging for answers, sitting for centuries.
Well, it's begging to be seen. This is the Great Pyramid. The Great Pyramid, the same thing. It begs to be seen. It's got alignments to the cardinal direction. It's asking astronomers to look at it, not Egyptologists. It's got shafts pointing to stars. It's got measurements that are baffling, that have ratios, that produce the pi ratios, the golden section.
Yeah.
It has codes in it. The people who designed it, these high priests of Heliopolis, were using a universal language. They were using astronomy and mathematics. This is what's coming out of all this. We're finding the same thing in Turkey. We need people who understand this. This is one of the big things that we're discussing among ourselves these days.
This is what you do with Thomas. Let's mention Thomas, because Thomas Brophy is an astrophysicist, and I love the fact that you two guys have teamed up, because you're getting double the value here, Robert. Double the fun, double the value. You got your wealth of knowledge with ancient Egypt, and Thomas as an astrophysicist. I love Thomas because I've seen Thomas on some documentaries, and Thomas, I can't wait to talk to Thomas as in astrophysics. But
yeah.
I think explain the Sotic cycle to the listeners, because this was everything to the ancient Egyptians, Robert.
Well, the ancient Egyptians from the earliest times, and now we believe from even before the pharaonic civilization. We have proof of this. I talked about on your previous program, I think, at Nabta Playa, the famous Nabta Playa prehistoric site. Well, in any case, let me say that they observed. Egyptologists know this and they don't deny this. They observed the star Sirius. The star Sirius was something that they paid particular attention to for various reasons. One of the reasons is that it appeared at dawn, certainly during the Pyramid Age, when the Nile was about to flood. They associated the appearance of Sirius after 70 days of invisibility, after its death, if you like. Its rebirth was associated to the rebirth of the Nile. So this is the first thing that one needs to understand. It had tremendous meaning to them. It meant rebirth, it meant regeneration, it meant afterlife, it meant all these things. But having said this, they fixed a calendar on the observation of its appearance every year. And like I said, they were very quickly aware that the star would appear at dawn for the first time after 70 days. After 365 days, it would do its cycle. But then they noticed that it would skip one day every 4 years. So they knew this. It's observable. They could see it like you can see it and I can see it. But they didn't adjust for it. They didn't. They left the year drift.
Yeah.
They left the calendar drift. Which means that if you fix a calendar based on this observation, which we know they did, then what happens is that the calendar loses a day every 4 years, right? It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
Which means that every 4 years, 1 day, every 8 years, 2 days, and so forth. For the calendar, for the new year, if you like, for their first day of the year, on the calendar, to return back to the star Sirius, in other words, to reconnect with that star's rising at dawn, you would need 1,461 years for the calendar to do its full cycle and return. Now, this is extremely useful that they did this. Very clever as well, because they had a drifting calendar, which means you can use it as long-term calendrics.
Yeah, yeah.
For example, if they say, if we know the calendar began, say, in 3000 BC, for argument's sake, and they tell us the New Year day of the calendar was on the 8th day of the year, then you know that they're... Hello?
Yeah, I'm listening. Yeah, it's the 8th.
You know, you multiply 8 times 4 and you get the number of years that they're talking about. You can date it. You can use what we call Sothic dating. And they do. They tell us this in many, many texts. There are about 12 of them. We hope to find more. But these 12 of them mention of what we call a Sirius or a Sothic date. Sothic is the way we call Sirius in calendars. Yeah. The Sothic date. Then we can date the event. For example, they tell us the birthday of this pharaoh occurred on the first day of the 5th month when the star Sirius rose at dawn. Okay? Bang! We can calculate it. So this is very, very important. And Egyptologists have not quite understood this. They ignore it. They say, no, the Egyptians weren't that clever. They didn't do this and forget it. Well, they did. And this is what we found with the Saqqara complex. Not only they did, but they did it on the very first architectural project. Mm-hmm. There's a message there. They're writing their history in stone. No, better still, they're writing their history in the sky. And this is what I've been saying since the last 25 years. You can read their history if you know how to read this language. There's a billboard up there in the sky, and they used it. They grafted images. They said this is Osiris, this is Isis, this is this, and this is that. This is the Milky Way, this is the Nile. And they used the machinery of the sky, the calendar up there, and this beautiful constellation to tell their story. And you have to learn how to read it.
You know the way I think sometimes, Robert, that these ancient Egyptians, right? Let's pinpoint Imhotep, for example, the super scientist, the Da Vinci type figure. I mean, the fact that you start encoding stuff in like a metaphysics monument, or the fact that you start using hieroglyphs to record data or information, you're appealing to the right side of the brain as well as the left. I mean, the left's making you make the monument, the engineering, the practical, but encoding with hieroglyphs appeals to artistic expression as well. Do you think that they basically may have just had a synchronizing of the brain using the left and the right balanced?
I will refer you to a very recent article that appeared, I think, in the Times, New York Times, in the magazine, sorry, the Times. Try and Google it. It's about the brain. No, I always make a mistake. It was in a French magazine, which I bought at the airport on my way to Minnesota. And it talks about this left-right brain.
Yeah.
The scientists now believe that there's no such thing as left-right and a left or right brain. There is one brain that is capable of thinking. Yes, there is a division, but it's not the division we think, female, male, intuitive, and whatever.
Yeah.
We can switch. We have this marvelous processor in there that, as I'm talking to you, I can switch from metaphysical thinking to practical thinking to spiritual thinking to emotional thinking. I can do that in one phrase. I can do that in one. That's the beauty of this amazing processor we have in there. It isn't just an incredible computer that can reason logic. It can feel, it can sense, it can record, it can memorize. In fact, it can memorize stuff that is incredible when you think about it. It memorizes a smell, a scent. How does it do this? So sorry, I'm going too fast, perhaps.
No, not at all. No, it's fascinating. You can, and that's a beautiful point. You can memorize a smell. You can kind of memorize what it's like, the ambience of a room or something.
Memorize a feeling.
Yeah.
Can you imagine what it is? I mean, we're zillion away from having a computer that can memorize a feeling, a sensation. So we have this incredible processor in there, which is at the moment keeping us alive and doing everything that it needs to do without us as we're talking. But it has that immense capacity, and we don't use it. Well, Imhotep did. That's what I was screaming out loud. We had people who were obliged to do it because they didn't have all these externalized and complicated lives that we have.
Yeah. Yeah.
This guy spent his time observing the sky instead of watching TV or driving his car or whatever. So
we steal our own thunder in a way. We steal our own thunder by the labor of modernization and the modern world. And I think in ancient times, these guys, they were always focused on knowledge, always focused on their own civilization. They were focusing on themselves as a...
Well, Imhotep, sorry, I keep barging, but Imhotep, let me give you the difference. He was no different than us. He was the same human being, a very intelligent one, but no different than us. But he didn't have the complexity that we have. We wake up in the morning and we don't realize how complex our lives is. We take it for granted, but we're submerged in this complexity. Just making a cup of tea is a whole complex thing. And we are constantly diverted away from reflection, from observing things, from observing the sky, from thinking in that, what I call the deep thinking. We're constantly distracted, all the time. So, having said this, there is nothing unusual about Imhotep, other than he was perhaps one of these geniuses, but he was in a different context. He was living in a different world. He was living in the world that I believe I very much believe this, James, as you know from our previous talks, but I believe a world that we need to recover. Human beings have to realize how incredibly and amazingly precious they are. They're the keepers of a life that is equipped with the most extraordinary capacities. And they don't use it. They don't. So, to me, every single human being has that capacity. And when I see people wasting their lives, without using this. So I'm not saying everybody's a genius and can run around and invent and be a rocket engineer. It's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that we're equipped. Each one of us is equipped. And to not use this equipment, It's like buying. It's like I see people who live on the Costa del Sol. You know, they buy these Maseratis and Ferraris just to go and buy the newspaper. You know, to a Formula One driver, he thinks they're nuts. He thinks, what a waste. And then when I see a human being wasting, so it's a big message that all these studies that Graham is doing, by the way.
Sure.
Graham is moving into the humanistic side, but in a very clever way. He's saying, listen, come on, guys. I mean,
yeah,
there is an amazing experience out there that each one of us can have. Now, he believes that you can approach it through ayahuasca and various things. I'm not very much into that, but I still believe we're on the same track.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there is a human adventure that each one of us we're equipped to do it. We're given the equipment. You know, evolution has produced this amazing equipment. We're something extraordinary. And Imhotep, because let's bring him back to there.
Yeah.
Imhotep was one of these men who happened to be, luckily, in that context. He was born in ancient Egypt. He managed to get himself in that extraordinary position of high initiation. And he's about to design this extraordinary project. This is what this book is about, by the way.
Yeah.
You know, and Tom and I put the best of our brains to read it. You know, there's a lot to do. I mean, we're not saying we fully understand it, but we have broken into his world. You know, we have begun to see this man rather than see what Hollywood's done with him. You know.
Sure. Well, when you read the book, Robert, the way you've broken the book down into sections, you've really dissected this from, you know, you can see you've read the script, you've tried to apply it to your best knowledge, your acceptance. You know what I kind of I read. This is what I read a lot of mainstream Egyptology, and I read a lot of alternative Egyptology, and I read anything to do with Egypt. I'll read it. Mm-hmm. But you know what fascinates me most, Robert? Me and you are sitting here today talking about this guy from 5,000 years ago that left us a monument. That, you know, I just think, what could we do, Robert, and leave something for our generation 5,000 years in the future? And I don't think our skyscrapers are going to be there. You know, we're leaving a load of nonsense for the 5,000 people or the 5,000 years in the future. You know.
Yeah, I'm glad you raised this point. Listening to what you were saying, well, first of all, yes, it is quite extraordinary that we know the name of the man who designed the very first architecture project in the world, you know, Imhotep. We know this. His name is inscribed on the foot of a pedestal at Saqqara. So there's no doubt about it. Which is strange, because when you think of the modern world, we have cathedrals in Europe where we don't know the architects. In fact, we don't know who built them. You know, so it's quite an extraordinary thing. He's left his name on it. Now, what we don't know is, if you look at it from the surface, we don't know who he really was, we don't know what he was trying to do, if you approach it from the dry Egyptological sense. So I don't want to go through all this discussion we've had. It's very obvious that this project needs to be read differently. But you're looking at a man who not only designed something for his king, he clearly designed something for it to remain there. It's very obvious. It doesn't take, again, a genius to realize that they were... Are you still there, James?
I am indeed, Robert. Yeah, I'm listening.
Right. So you're being very quiet. Yes. The project itself is a testimony of somebody who wanted it to be there for a long time. You know, he went to a lot of trouble. Same thing with the pyramid builders. Same thing with the builder of the Great Pyramid. They weren't just building something for a generation. They were building it for eternity. Indeed, they say so. They actually say in many of their temples, these are the buildings of eternity. So they looked at it on very long term. They didn't plan projects like this for like we do, you know, an airport that's going to last 50 years and then we'll build another one. Yeah? They built something
long term, real.
Long term.
Yeah.
And we really must consider why. We must consider why, because they had something important, crucially important, to them at least, that needed to survive. this knowledge, this sacred knowledge, call it what you like. And this is where it becomes very, very interesting. And to me, having studied not just monuments, not just the pyramids, not just the temples of the Old Kingdom, but having taken it to the end of this civilization. As you know, I've written a lot about the so-called Hermetic texts.
Yes, yes.
Because the Hermetic texts have a message, but it's a kind of dire message. They're saying we're going to lose this. It's going to disappear if you're not careful. And they're very scared. When you read the Hermetic text, you realize that whoever wrote them is very fearful that there is an intrusion in this wonderful civilization they had, which are the Romans coming in and taking over and converting the whole country into a mess. I'm writing a book about this, by the way, with Ahmed Osman. Yeah,
we're going to get into a little update on that, Robert, as well, and what's going on in Egypt today. But
yes, I will, because that's what it's all about. It's all about, what's it all about is that we seem to have in ancient Egypt a very, very beautiful model of culture. People who sustain the culture for 3,000 years and perhaps more, perhaps a lot more, in perfect harmony, in wonderful creativity. It's there even for us to see it today. And they were scared that this would be lost, this wonderful spiritual legacy. And that's what the Hermetic texts are about. The Hermetic text is calling, saying, look, something is wrong here. There is this famous lament by Hermes Trismegistus in the Hermetic text, saying this wonderful country of ours is, and there's monuments, this belief in eternity, these ideas that the soul is immortal is going to collapse because we're being intruded by these strangers who are imposing on us something else. And they really, I believe, talking about the Romans coming in and the Christianity imposing itself and so forth. So this is what it means to me. There is a model to understand, and Imhotep believed in this, fervently believed in this. There's no doubt about it, because they wouldn't have built those monuments, and they're there for us to read them. And what is going wrong with our world today is that we don't have a model that works. Nothing works. Even democracy is not working. So
they were leaving a worthwhile legacy, I think, Robert.
They left what I believe is a system of order in a message designed in architecture and texts and explained and graphed in the sky. I believed it's there. It is a system of order that they called Ma'at. It's the cosmic order. It's the way that human beings have to exist in harmony with the natural world. This is as simple as I can put it. It is a natural religion, if you can call it that. And they understood it, they respected it, they applied it. And this is why they survived in wonderful harmony and creativity. When you lose sense of this model, when you start inventing doctrines and dogmas and rules and regulations that are not natural to us, we make a mess. And this is what happened to the world, and more so happening in Egypt. There's a mess going there, a complete cultural mess. Why? Because they've lost contact with their roots. They are in the country which existed for thousands of years in wonderful harmony, existed in collaboration with nature, existed and produced these wonderful masterpieces that we go there, people come from all over the world to see them. And it's lost. It's lost in its ideology. There's a mess in Egypt. Let's talk about this.
Yeah. Just before we go into Egypt, Robert, and today, what's going on today, Imhotep, you wrote a book about Black Genesis as well. Are we saying that Imhotep was black-skinned African? Was he one of the black rulers?
Yes. I'm saying all ancient Egyptians from the early dynasties were black. I mean, what's wrong with that?
Yeah, no, and this is the key thing. I mean, it's something that the Egyptologists don't address too much either.
Well, too bad. I mean, look, Egypt is in Africa. It's what, when I hear people saying we're not Africans, it's absolutely ridiculous. Egypt is in Africa, okay? It's a geographical fact. But Egypt today even is co-bordering with Black Africa. The south of Egypt is adjacent to Black Africa, Sudan, Chad, East Africa. The Nile comes from Black Africa. And the people came from there. We all came from there, by the way. I mean, I don't know if I talked about this on your last show. We are all originating from Central East Africa. We're 200,000 years away. We've changed color. We've changed hairdo, but we're still the same. It's just cosmetic. We're all from the same source, and the original source is Black African. It's a fact. Let's stop playing around with this. But as far as I'm concerned, the original Egyptians were of black-skinned people. It's now being acknowledged, by the way, even with Egyptologists. They came from Central Africa, where the whole world is populated from a source from Central Africa. But there is a contingency that stayed in the Sub-Sahara. There's many that stayed in Africa, of course, which is the whole African continent today. But a contingent stayed in Sub-Sahara Africa, in what we call southwest of Egypt, and eventually stayed there for several thousand years. They produced things like Nabta Playa, the astronomical sites of Nabta Playa. They domesticated cattle. They learned about the stars. They moved stone. When the Sahara became super arid, they moved to the Nile Valley. And that's the Egyptians. That's the origins of the Egyptians. Now people say, well, Tutankhamun was a bit fair, and there is some people with red skin, red hair, and all this rubbish. Well, it's true, but they're talking about thousands of years later. It's like going to America today and saying, no, the original people weren't red Indians, because what you see in the street is blacks and whites and yellow, and of course, Egypt today and Egypt 1,000 years ago, Egypt even 2,000 years ago, was highly infiltrated by various groups. But the original Egyptians were Black Africans. That's it. It's a fact.
Do you look into the Dogon at all? Because the Dogon are purported to have come out of ancient Egypt too.
Yes. Well, I don't look at them, but I know many writers, of course, who have looked at them. Primarily Robert Temple, who was a friend of mine, I haven't seen him for a long time. Speaking about this, I think it was 2 days ago, there was a memorial service for Michael Bejon in London. I was asked to go, unfortunately. I couldn't make it. But it reminded me, as I spoke with Robert Temple, because I'm sure he was there. They were great colleagues. Anyway, having said this, Laird Creighton has done a lot of work on this. I've met him in Minneapolis. He's using the symbol of cosmology to find the connections between the Dogons and the Egyptians. It's very convincing.
And another man with another unique skill set, Robert, computer language programming. You're looking at the language.
Yes, I like this about him. He's a very nice guy, by the way. I like Laird. We had a great time together, and we correspond. I can't get into that too much, because I'm a great believer that one should stick to one's own speciality. And so I'm interested, but it's not really my line. But I have no problem in seeing the Dogons as an offshoot of the ancient Egyptians. The early ancient Egyptians were great travelers, much greater travelers than Egyptologists were ready to accept. We've proved it. I was in the Sahara with Tom Brophy, and we went all the way to a place called Jebel Uwaynat, which borders with Libya and Sudan. And the reason we went there is that a friend of ours, Mark Borda, a desert explorer, found hieroglyphs on a boulder there, which are from the Old Kingdom. I've put this in Black Genesis with pictures. So the Egyptians were travelers, and they were very, very bold travelers, because they traveled to these distant areas. But Egyptologists were saying before, no, they couldn't do it because they couldn't carry the water and all this stuff. Well, they did. They did. The proof is there. And let me tell you, when we went there, it took us 5 days to go with 4-wheel drive. It was quite a journey. And so the ancient Egyptians did it presumably on foot and with donkeys. They didn't even have the camel in those days. So they were great travelers.
No GPS, Robert.
They did have GPSs. No, they did. No, I'm not joking. They did have GPSs, but
It was the star. It was the stars. It was their.
that's right. And that's where all this star stuff comes from. They observed, they understood, and they made use of it, like navigators. So this is the wonderful thing about when you go in the Sahara. You begin to understand these people. You begin to really get them. You begin to really understand, and you are very influenced by the thing that influenced them most, which was the sky observation. We forget this, James. It's very sad in our present culture that people don't do this, because we're part of a cosmos. We're not just here on this planet. Our planet is part of a solar system, which is part of a galactic system, which is part of a huge cosmological system. We're part of it. And we need to see it this way. Not just, what's coming out of all this? Sorry, I'm taking over here.
You're fine, Robert. Go on. You're fine.
Yeah. We have to wake up to two things. Number one, the origins of human existence. We are all from the same source. We're one big family, and there's no thing as race. There's just ethnicity. We just changed colors, that's all. But there's one big family here. Number two is that this family belongs to a planet, and this planet belongs to a cosmos. This is what 21st century man must begin to think. We must remove all this nonsense about separation and countries and borders and religions and all that separates us. This is what's wrong with this planet, and we're going to make a mess of it if we don't wake up to this very fundamental reality of our existence. And I'm a great advocate of this. That's why I'm talking on your show, because the message needs to come out. It needs to be broadcasted. We need to have politicians start talking in those terms rather than divisions. We're seeing it. Yeah.
In a small way, Robert. That's why I do the show for two reasons, Robert, and just what you spoke about. One is to look at ancient knowledge and try and get to some answers, Robert, so that it's not forgotten, because it is sad. And I like to get to the good stuff, Robert. There's a lot of, and I like to, in a small little way, bring some shows to the surface and some authors that, to do some good shows. But also, I think if we don't know who we were in the past, Robert, we can't move forward, Robert. We can't go forward if we don't know who we were in the past. We don't know where we're coming from. We're all brothers and sisters, and we're evolved at one point consciously, and we've descended into chaos. I think we can get back out of that chaos again, Robert.
Yes. Again, to bring Graham Hancock has this amazing phrase that he coined. He said, we're a species with amnesia. Well, we're no more a species with that much of amnesia. We know our origins. At least we know that we sprang from a similar source. It's a wonderful thing to know. It's like when Copernicus discovered that the Earth was not having the sun going around it. It was the other way around. It's a great epiphany. The epiphany is genetics. Genetics has proved, and paleoanthropology has proved, that we are from a common source. There was a woman in Central Africa some 200,000 years ago who gave birth to the first modern man. That's it. And we're it. The 5 billion people on this planet are from that same source. We're one huge, gigantic family. But we're beginning to be more and more aware that we're just a tiny little planet on a huge cosmological scale. We belong to the cosmos. We will join the cosmos. Sooner or later we will. We're sending people on Mars very soon. We belong to this giant, amazing creation, and we have to wake up to it. Because that not only will save us from the direction we're going, but it's giving us this amazing vision of who we are. I've said this at the earlier part of your show. I'll say it in a different way, because I've had a long conversation with a cosmologist in London, a friend of mine. He's an Englishman living in Paris. And we had this talk, and it's something easy and yet difficult to understand. When you understand, from what we know today, that this universal creation that we are part of began 14.5 billion years ago. It's estimated it will have another 5 billion years to go. We're kind of 2/3 down the line in this huge timeline. And yet a human life, the existence of Homo sapien, modern man, is but a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of this timeline. That's who we are. And a human life is a fraction of 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 this timeline. And yet, this is how precious it is, because can you imagine an external civilization out there looking for life now? They could have come 10 billion years ago, they could have come 5 billion years from now, and they wouldn't have found it. It is now that it is happening. And we're it. We're so incredibly rare and precious in this timeline, and we don't get it. Our politicians don't get it. We will become sort of immune to all this that is going on. I hear bombing in Kuwait and wars in Syria and people protesting in Egypt and killing each other. What a madness! Because each one of these individuals,
sure.
If like I say, we're talking about ancient aliens now again, but should there is a civilization out there much more advanced than us, and they want to find life, they'll have to find us. And us is so rare. Even if they find one of us, they'll be so excited. They'll be so excited to find one of us, like we will be so excited to find one of them. And that's how precious one of us is. That's it.
We better interact before they come, Robert.
This is cosmology, man. This is it. This is the cutting-edge cosmological thinking. This is metaphysical cosmology.
Okay, Robert, speaking of changing times, let's talk about Egypt today. Actually, can we just say what Imhotep's name means, one who comes in peace?
Yes, what a wonderful name, isn't it?
I look up every time I read about an Egyptian king or deity, or I look up the name and the meaning of the name, but what a wonderful name, one who comes in peace.
Yes, and this is why we believe that he actually came from the Nubian area. One of the reasons. We've traced through texts, there's two schools of thought. One, that he was of parentage that were in the Delta area, or at least his mother. The other, that his father was an architect in Hierakonpolis, which is the first capital of the pharaonic civilization in Upper Egypt, Southern Egypt. And there, it's Nubian area, that's where they're black. So his name, come in peace. I believe that he was the son of a great architect who designed probably or was involved with the Hierakonpolis ruins that's still there. They very much compare to the Saqqara complex, particularly the boundary wall. And I believe that, there is evidence. There is evidence at Hierakonpolis, this ancient, very early first dynastic site, that they had contacts with these people from the Sahara. We found physical evidence there. This is well known to Egyptologists. So there was contact. That means that these black African scientists, if you like, I call them the star people in Sahara, had come. And the father of Imhotep was either a descendant from them or a Nubian who had learned from them, either or. And Imhotep is that man, and he comes to Lower Egypt, probably commissioned by the pharaoh. He comes in peace, and he comes to do this great, great project. This is how you have to see him. This is a man who takes the name, or his parents gave him the name of go there in peace. Because there was, in fact, some conflict between the south and the north. This is a moment, a great moment, where a pharaoh not only decides to do a project for his eternal destiny, but he wants to do something that consolidates this land into one major site. Imhotep is the man. He's the man who comes in peace and does it. This is how I see him. This is the Vatican, man. This is the Vatican. When they build the Vatican, I wrote a book called The Vatican Heresy.
Sure, I want to mention that because you got 2 books coming out next year, Robert. You've been such a busy man. I thought I was the busiest guy on radio. But
we're all busy. We all do our own thing. But yeah, I do.
Sorry, Robbie. You have the Vatican Heresy coming out in the new year, and Egypt Unveiled: The Quest for Matt with Ahmed Osman.
Yes.
Just for the listeners, I have done a show on the Vatican Heresy with Princess Chiara Hohenzollern, who you have co-authored the book with. And thank you for putting me in touch with Princess Chiara. She's such a fascinating, interesting lady.
She is, yes. A lovely lady. There is also involved in the writing of this book, or rather the research, a professor of mathematics called Sandro Ziccari, Sandro Ziccari collaborated in the research for the American edition, and he's now a co-author on the Italian edition. Sandro Ziccari and I will also write a sequel to the Vatican Heresy next year. Yeah, I mean, I've been very, very busy. But, you know, to be honest with you, book production or book writing is I won't say easier, but quicker.
You're getting better at it these days, Robert.
Well, you get better as you write books, but you have a lot of information on the internet if you know how to look for it, particularly good information from university libraries and so forth. So much of the legwork has been dispensed with.
Sure. I think that's a key thing to mention, Robert. The internet has changed alternative history, alternative research, because it used to be you'd have to go to the place, where now you can do it in your armchair if you like, Robert.
Well, you know, just, I mean, let me tell you, for example, we consulted original books from Kepler, from Galileo, from Vatican letters. We didn't actually have to go. You know, through the means of being through Sandro Ziccari and my research facilities, we could get books like Galileo's original. We got Kepler's original on the net. I mean, it's like you've got it on your desk. So this is very, 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 very useful. Useful isn't the word. It's an amazing jump in book writing. I mean, all writers know this today, but particularly researchers who do work like I do. You know, you can fly around the world with Google Earth. I mean, you know, you don't have to go anymore.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I'm not saying there isn't the legwork to do and the on-site investigations. We do that. You know, I've been in the Sahara with Tom Brophy, but much of the stuff that we needed to write books, articles, original documents, measurements, alignments. For example, you can measure alignments using Google Earth technology.
I use that myself, Robert, in Ireland and the UK for ancient sites. You can hover over, take the ruler, measure the diameter.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, it's beautiful stuff. I mean, but of course there's a lot of rubbish as well. So good researchers, responsible researchers, like going in a library. I mean, there's a lot of rubbish in libraries and there's a lot of good stuff. So you have to know what to look for and be very selective. But otherwise, it's a wonderful tool. I mean, boy, I'm giving you an interview sitting in my office looking at the sea. There you are.
Wow.
When I start, yeah.
Sorry, Robert. Tell me about Egypt today. What's going on? Is it safe to travel? I have a trip coming up very soon, if not in January, I think.
Yeah, it's very...
Sorry, I'm going to go for a week in January if I can.
Good, well done. Yeah, no, it's very safe. I mean, look, the whole world is... you never know these days. I mean, you know, you're sitting on a beach in Indonesia and then there's a tsunami, you know? You're on a plane and something goes wrong. You're in a shopping mall in Kenya and some nutcase open fire. You never know. But having said this, surprisingly, considering there's been a revolution and a counter-revolution and a takeover by the military and all this stuff that's been going on for 2 years in Egypt, we haven't heard of one single aggressive act towards tourism. So it's quite extraordinary. There's been more tourists hurt in other countries than in Egypt. So I would say honestly it's very safe, provided you don't go and join a protest in Tahrir Square, you know, something like that. But.
Sure. I have to say, Robert, for all the countries I've been to, when I go to Egypt, I've been 3 occasions. You get respected there as a tourist, Robert. You know, they love tourists. You don't sit down and pray to them, but I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that, you know, there's a lot of respect there for tourism. It's a commodity, and the Egyptians know that, and there's a lot of respect there, and they take care of tourists. They really do. Like.
Yes. Well, you know, yeah, it's a commodity, but I have to say, I've said it, and I say it again, the Egyptian people are very nice people. They really are. I mean, in fact, they're so friendly that tourists get a bit surprised. You know, they get overwhelmed by this attention and friendliness. They're very naturally affable people, and it's very sad that this affability, this strong human kindness that you see in Egypt. It's amazing. I mean, you walk in the street and people, in villages, and people invite you to have tea with them, and they offer you food, and they really are like that.
Basic things, but it's nice. I mean, we go through our big cities in the Western world, Robert, and we get conditioned to this stupid Western modernization that we've created for ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, Europe was like this. In fact, Europe was like this in the 60s. I mean, I remember when I came in the 60s, England, with all due respect, was a very different place. You could talk to a Bobby in the street and joke and laugh, and you didn't get fined just because, you raised your voice or something. We're beginning to create, I mean, liberal democracy has gone down the drain as far as I'm concerned. There's so many regulations and rules and political correctness rubbish that you can't feel free anymore, really. Having said this, going back to Egypt, I mean, Egypt is in chaos, there's no doubt. I mean, let's be honest. But it's been chaos for 60 years. It's a very nice chaos. People love it because people are, you see a very wonderfully organic way of living, the driving and yeah, it's Egypt. It's Egypt, it's the third world, but I love it. I love this because you know what? To an Egyptian, and this is what strikes tourists when they go there, they take a while to realize this. They say, oh my God, it's chaos, and the cars and the noise and people in the street, and they cross the road without paying attention, and all this stuff. But then they begin to realize something that is so wonderful. They see people talking to each other. They see people talking to each other in the street, and a policeman talks to his friend, and a fruit seller talks to the tourist, and everybody's having fun, and they're talking to each other, and they're interacting, and they realize, my God, we don't do this. We don't do this. We walk in the streets in London, and nobody talks to me, and that's the difference, and it'll be a very sad thing. I don't want Western democracy to go to Egypt. I'm going to shock a lot of people. Yeah, we want a form of democracy, but we don't want to change that fundamental humanistic attitude that the Egyptians have. It would be terrible if they turn like us. I don't want them to be like us. I want them to be the way they are, but in a much more orderly, in a much more controlled way, because what's happened in Egypt is gone out of control, and we're coming back again to the big circle, to this idea of cosmic order. We can have happy, contented, harmonious, creative people. We can have this if we associate them to the way that human beings have to naturally associate to their existence and the world around them. This is what ancient Egypt was, and Egypt can be like that. It still has that potential. 95% of Egypt is not Cairo. What you see on the news is this agitated people in the towns, and this is Western touch to Egypt. I grew up in Egypt, and I see it happening. I saw it happening for 60 years. When you go outside Cairo, when you go and roam about the villages, you see something else.
Different Egypt, yeah.
Well, different Egypt, but you see people who have long adapted in total harmony and integrity to the way that their natural surroundings are. It may sound a bit sort of romantic, but it's true. We need to be able to do this. We need to be able to accept the world as it is and learn how to live in the way it is, not the way we want it. And we are trying to change this world in what it is not. So it's a natural world. We're part of it. I'm not suggesting we go and climb trees and becoming gorillas again. I'm suggesting that we need to to integrate with it. And this is what you see in Egypt today if you go outside, and this is what you probably would have seen in Egypt 5,000 years ago. So it's still there. And what annoys me with the present governments, and the governments have been there for the last 60 years, is that instead of seeing this, they've exploited this. They've exploited this nice, affable, friendly people, and they've let them rot, if you like, and they capitalized on the earnings of this country. This country has a great potential. I mean,
totally, Robert. Beautiful potential sitting there, and you know what? I think there's a lot of well-wishing people in the world, Robert, wanting a resolution and you know, things to change. Just from the outside, because people see ancient Egypt there, they see the monuments, and, you know, there's a lot of people have travelled to Egypt. It's one of the biggest destinations in the world, Robert, to see the monuments there, and there's a lot of well-wishing people to see the resolution come back. But you know, it hasn't stopped tourism. That's the good thing.
Well, let me just cap this. So we're getting very romantic, but I'm in that kind of mood. People that I take to Egypt, I don't just show them the monuments. Yeah, sure, they come and they want to see the pyramids, and we do our stuff there, and we go and see the temples. But I actually take them around. I actually take people swimming in the Nile. I actually take people walking around in villages. We go on bikes, and we go and cycle in the Nile Valley. Because this is finally what they begin to wake up to. Not just seeing stones and monuments and ancient sites.
Wow.
Begin to realize a land that was so, it's still very beautiful, but a land that allows you to integrate with nature. It's got this wonderful, wonderful setting. You know, I have people swimming in the Nile, and they get this biggest thrill. And they've seen the pyramids, they've seen the temples, I've taken them at dawn to watch the sunrise at Karnak, all these wonderful things. But you know what they remember most is, my God, I've almost touched this ancient civilization. I've actually swam in the Nile and felt what they felt. This is what it's about, my friend. You know, we tend to forget this.
Selling the trip for me, Robert. Do you have a trip?
I do. You do.
I might postpone January just to come on this trip, but you, Robert, you're selling it to me here. You are very romantically putting it forward. You know.
Well, that's what I enjoy. I mean, I've been doing this for 20 years, and I would have finally stopped just taking people to take photographs at ancient monuments. I want them to not see these monuments as just ancient ruins. I want them to realize that they are a legacy, and the legacy of the people that build them is still there. You can actually feel what they feel. You can watch a sunrise on a desert dune. You can swim in the Nile. I take them in settings where you're detached from modern civilization, and the landscape is like it was 5,000 years ago. And suddenly they connect. They get it. They say, my God, this is how it should be. This is how it should be. And how far and how distorted we've gone. They go back in their cities and they miss it. They miss it because they've had a glimpse of how it should be. How's that for putting it? Anyway, let me tell you about my tour, since you mentioned it.
Please do, Robert.
I have a tour coming up in March. You'll find it on my website, and it's www.robertbauval.co.uk. If you go there, you'll find somewhere where to click, and it says tour, and all the details are there. I don't like to show that I'm in competition with others, but I've priced this tour at least 1,000, if not more, pounds less than other tours.
I was going to put that point across there, Robert. This is a very good value tour. I mean, for you know, there's people out there, Robert, you know, and a lot more expensive than you, and people I would think would expect you're this big famous author around the world doing all this stuff. There's a big fee involved, but Robert, this is quite a very good value tour, very, very, very reachable.
The reason is that there is no middleman. I have an agent, a very simple but very efficient agent in Cairo, and he's a one-man show. We have a registered tour company with us, but we cut all the middlemen. You know, there's a lot of expenses, and on top of that, yes, I don't take a fee. I don't do that. I don't do that in my conferences. I'm well off, by the way. Thank you very much. I've done well with my books. I've done well with my engineering, and I'm 65 years old, and I don't need to take fees. I do it for fun. Sure. You know, to me, the big thing in doing things these days is enjoying it. You know, I want to have fun. And fun is not a bad word. You know, fun is letting the soul have its time. I do that with everything. I do that with my writing. I don't get paid much for my books these days. You can't live on that. But sure. I do them. I do them because it brings me joy, and this is how I want these tours to be. I don't want people to come and there are other tours. You can go there, take your camera and go on other tours. With mine, bring your camera, of course, but come for an experience. You come to find ancient Egypt. That's what I call my tour, the quest for Mat. It is the quest to be there, to try and find it, and once you see it in you, hopefully you'll go back to your own country and begin to think in different terms. You begin to think, yes, there is a way to get out of this mess. And Egypt is a window. It's there for us to see it before they destroy it. You know? Anyway, you're reaching the end of your interview, I think.
So I am indeed, Robert, and we're just there, and what an awesome show again, Robert. And I'm really thinking about this marriage tour now. I'm going to link this up on CapricornRadio.com as well. And
what do you mean? You have a tour, or you're going on your own?
Oh, I'm going on my own with another friend, but I might just push the January tour to March to go on this one because.
Well, come on ours, and
awesome, Robert.
We can talk about. I mean, if you're coming as a in your capacity, we'll try and fit you in a discount bracket.
Oh,
but yeah, you should come. I mean, well, look. I mean, I know I'm blowing my trumpet here, but it's true. If you look at people who have come on my tours, they leave with something else. They feel like Egypt has entered their system, and Egypt in the metaphysical sense. This sensation that you have not only made contact with the cradle of civilization, but you have seeded it in you. I look at the world. I mean, I've been looking at the world very differently over the last 30 years since I've been involved with this exploration of ancient Egypt. But those who come seed it in them. And I love this because they talk about it all the time. I mean, they meet. There are friends in New York who discuss this because they realize you have to see this, and then you wake up to your own context and you realize how it's become and how sad it is that people walk in New York and don't talk to each other, and if you touch a child these days, you're accused of being a pedophile and this kind of nonsense. We have installed a fear of humanity that needs to be removed, and we have detached ourselves too much from the natural world. So come to Egypt, come on these tours, and reconnect.
Sure. I have to say, just to finish off, Robert, every time I've gone to Egypt, I felt like I was home, and I've never had that any other. I chase ancient monuments all around the world. That's the number one reason I go. I don't go on a traditional holiday. I always go to ancient monuments, and I'm obsessed with ancient monuments, whatever culture it is. But it's been a pleasure having you on the show, Robert.
It's been a pleasure talking to you, and thank you for allowing me to express all these deeper ways to look at things. Thank you, James.
For sure. Come back anytime, Robert.